Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming down for another Ask the CISO interview sponsored by Fortinet. This is Stephen Kroll from Cybercrime magazine. I'm sitting here today with Liz Joyce. She is the Chief Information Security Officer at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Steve. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming down. We really appreciate you taking the time. So let's just get right into it. I was doing some background research, and I saw that you went to school in Dublin, Ireland. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, sure. So I actually was born in Ireland, grew up there, went to school, went to college, obviously, have my first job there. And it was a really great experience. Good culture, good education system. And for me, I was always a little bit of a math and science geek. So had lots of opportunity to do lots of different sciences in school and continue that on in college.
Okay, so you did sciences in secondary school and then continued that on in college.
Yeah.
A question I have then following that, now that you're kind of an expat, right?
Yeah.
And your kids are going to school here, do you notice maybe a difference at all in the education systems? Or, we don't know much about the UK system, so could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know that there's so much of a difference. I think a lot has changed actually back in Ireland about the education systems, and in fact, I think they've adopted some of the practices that were over here in the US.
Oh, wow, okay.
And especially at the college level. So I hear my nephew and my nieces talking, and it sounds very like what I used to hear when I was in college, but relative to US colleges. So I think they are looking at obviously depth in education, but also trying kind of to diversify and give people a broad experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really changed, and I really like to see and very supportive of.
Yeah, that's really good. And then you also did graduate work. Well, where did you do your graduate work, and what was your specialty?
Yeah. So I did my postgraduate in Ireland, did computer science, and decided that I really liked the area and wanted to continue on and do some research. I went out into kind of private business for a while, but then decided I had the opportunity to do some research work.
Okay.
I was going to do it in distributed systems, but then found this area called information security. So I've actually done my doctorate in information security with the University of Plymouth in the UK.
Okay. And then what was the dissertation on?
So it was about security in distributed systems,
Okay.
which was incredibly new at the time. And specifically, it was integrated service engineering. And I did studies about having what they called a security broker.
Okay.
So how you would negotiate security between a distributed system, and actually wrote a secure interoperability protocol to facilitate that. And again, it was all very new. Nobody used the word cyber at that time. It was
Okay.
all information security. Distributed systems were kind of developing and becoming these far more integrated networks. So they started to consider security at that point. I just found it really interesting because there really was very little done at that time. It was a developing area. And just to be part of doing some of that work was great. I just found it incredibly challenging. I used to love mystery books as a kid.
Okay.
So you put the math and science together with some of the mystery that you have when you're doing cyber, and it's just really enjoyable, really challenging. But additionally, I think I also saw you could see that cyber was something that was occurring everywhere. So I used to work with telcos, financials, healthcare, lots of different industries. And cyber was something that was starting to come up in every single area. So I also felt it was something that had such a sort of global impact that the contribution could be pretty big.
And that's why you got interested in it.
Yes.
So you're a cyber detective, really?
Well, I don't know that I call myself a detective,
Okay.
but I just love the challenge.
So what is your background? I guess we kind of went over that and how you got started into the technology field. You weren't initially planning on cyber, as you said.
Yeah, at the very beginning, actually, when I went to college, I originally thought I was going to do robotics. So
Okay.
as a kid, I used to love to kind of go around to any lectures or go visit places, anything to do with science, and my family was super supportive of that. And I remember going to a big industrial plant and seeing a huge amount of robotics there. And I just thought this was the coolest thing, seeing how they could honestly keep the workers safer by doing some of the more difficult and dangerous tasks, but also just the whole science behind how do you get a machine to do that and how do you get it to operate. And I thought that was the path I would go. And then when I went to college, I specifically picked UCD because there was a good path around robotics and hardware that you could do there, but then found the software engineering side. And that was amazing to me, just everything you could do, all the potential. So I went down that path. And then when I went on to do the doctorate, this other area of information security popped up. And that really sort of gathered my interest then and hasn't lost it since. So always in the science fields, but it's definitely changed over time where my focus has been.
All right, great. So then when you finished your graduate work, you were working in the UK at that time in Plymouth,
Yes.
England.
Yeah.
What brought you to the States then?
Well, again, as a little kid, heard about the U.S.
Okay.
Obviously, I learned about it, and also it was just hearing about astronauts going to the moon and all that. So the opportunities, it was always fascinating to me, and I always wanted to come to the U.S. But then the opportunity presented itself work-wise.
Okay.
So I was working with a company in the UK, and doing security services, delivering them to customers, and had the opportunity with them to move to the US and take a position here. So I sort of jumped at that chance, that opportunity.
Which company in the UK then?
I was actually Symantec.
Okay.
So I had actually decided at one point, I used to work with, as I mentioned, across lots of different industries, consulting, and made a very specific decision that I wanted to work for a security company. And at the time that, joined Symantec, started in the UK with them, initially as a security architect, so a very technical job.
Okay.
And then progressed. I was with Symantec for several years, and ultimately went into management there, managing some of their managed services, taking the job in the US where I became the director. So moving from a purely technical role into more of a leadership and business role. And when I left Symantec, I was running the Americas Services business there.
Okay.
So it was really just a development in a career going from a highly technical role, but starting to see, I think, across security, all the different facets and areas that can impact security in any company or business.
And then as you moved up, you started to work with the whole business enterprise as well.
Yeah, that just became an essential. So it couldn't be something that was purely defined as working with, just your IT team or whatever. You really, and it's something that's changed across the industry in general, is there's all the different components and facets, whether it is you're working as a compliance manager or risk manager, whether you're doing forensics. But critically, you have to understand what is of value to the business, what are you protecting and defending. So a true understanding of the business, what's important, what are the critical assets. That just gave me an appreciation of that whole other side, business side of things, and then a way to be able to frankly have the conversation with the folks across the business to understand when there is something that we have to do or we need to do in order to protect and defend.
And because of your technical background and able to convey that into layman's terms, they're more willing to take your suggestions.
Yeah, I think it's become one of the really important characteristics for any security leader these days, is that ability to translate what can either be a deep technical issue or a regulatory compliance issue, and take it and put it into terms of, here's what you're trying to do in the business, here's why this is important, and here's what we need to do to address it. Because it's never just the job of the cyber team. Everybody has a role to play in security. So it's ensuring that people understand that and you're making the right decision for the business, and able to drive and take the action that needs to be done then to do that.
Okay, and that's a great segue to my next question then. So you went from highly technical to management and leadership to now CISO. How did that happen? How did you go from management to now Chief Information Security Officer?
Yeah, so when I was in the US, then I went to work for another company specifically delivering services, so data centers, networks, customer support, that kind of thing. But they made the decision that they wanted somebody who had a security background because they were trying to build security into everything that they were doing. And so I was lucky enough to get that position. So it almost became doing the CISO job, but without the title as a start.
Okay.
When I went to HPE, as it was at the time, I was part of the software division.
Okay.
And at that point, then I definitively got the CISO title along with the delivery job.
Okay.
So there was recognition of how important it was to have security in cyber and have that applicable within the business area into everything that you do.
So were you was there a CISO position at HPE before you, or were you the first one to do it? I'm just curious for myself and our listeners.
No, there was, it was pretty unique, the CISO position, I think, in the software division.
Okay.
But there was a global CISO.
Okay.
And had a great relationship with the CISO at the time. But then we saw the strength in trying to consolidate and do things, having great partnership with the business, but also ensuring that we were kind of uniting all the different resources because, there's a shortage of resources when it comes to cyber generally.
Yeah. So then with the shortage of resources and consolidating, what does it take to be successful in your role?
I think, look, there's a whole bunch of answers that you could give here about you need to be a risk manager, a compliance manager, you need to have some technical capabilities. But I think the single most important thing right now is your communication skills. So as you mentioned, that ability to translate and take whatever the issue, concern, or area is at the time, be it technical or not, and translate that so the business understands the issue and what the risk is. And then you can make a business decision about what to do. That and being able to build and collaborate across a broad spectrum of different functions and so forth. And also a partnership externally. So ultimately it comes down to that ability to communicate and build partnerships.
So do you work with other leaders in different industries, other CISOs and technology people?
Absolutely. I think the CISO role is one of those roles where it doesn't matter if you're talking to somebody in a different vertical or frankly you're talking to the CISO of competition. Everybody is fighting the same fight, and everybody understands that we are stronger if we help each other.
Yeah.
So it's a really nice thing, I think, about the role. There's a lot of things that are challenging about the role, but I think that is something that everybody is pretty strong on, is that we have to partner. So I'm a member of different groups and certain coalitions that are specifically devoted to CISOs, trying to help each other, but additionally, trying to help others understand the problem and what we need to do so we can do it better. And I think it's absolutely essential that we have those partnerships, those discussions. I think every CISO knows if you have an issue, you can pick up the phone and call anybody else and figure out if they have the same problem, they've seen something like that. I think it's pretty unique, but definitely glad that we have the ability to do that.
That's nice. That's exactly what I was thinking. You heard it here. Cybersecurity is bringing competitors together, right?
I think so in a way, right? Because we're all fighting the same battle. And that's the only way that we're going to do it, is if we do it together.
So then if you're fighting the same battle, what are the threats that everyone's facing in the cybersecurity field?
It's a very long list. And I think it's not necessarily any one threat. To me personally, I think it's all about the pace of change, right? And that's in a couple of different ways. So there's been the pace of change in technology, right, even over recent years. So we've gone from, having sort of monolithic data centers to Wi-Fi and networks and IoT and cloud, and now everybody's talking AI and so forth. So there's just been such a broad spectrum of technology change, and you have to keep up with that. And when it's immature, it may be harder to defend. But then as it matures, that's going to get leveraged, right?
Okay.
So you have to understand how you can leverage the technology in order to better do your job. But additionally, you have to also recognize that the attackers are going to be trying to use the same technology against you. So that constant rate of change and the adaptability by attackers who they see you figure out how to put in controls and defend certain issues like phishing, for example. If you think of phishing kind of some years ago, everybody could spot a fish, right? It was pretty clear and pretty easy. But clearly they've adapted to that. They're far more sophisticated. They're now becoming far more targeted and getting harder to defend against. So it's that continuous evolution, continuous change. It's trying to keep up on all those different areas. I think that's the biggest issue. It's so broad.
And then that's something I wanted to ask as well, specifically about IoT devices and the cloud. What are your thoughts on them, on keeping them secure within your industry, within the field as a whole?
Yeah. So I think with cloud, the cloud's matured quite a bit. It sometimes gets a bad rap, but in fact, a lot's been done, I think, to improve cloud security in recent years. And like with everything, right? Like I said, it's going to constantly evolve and constantly change and improve. I think relative to cloud, what's important is for somebody using cloud, you need to understand why you're using it. Like, what is your strategy? What are the assets you are putting in there? What is the data you are putting in there? Do you then have the services and the ability to defend it the way that you want to? Be that in the cloud, or do you want to put us, on-prem or have a hybrid solution? So I think as much as there's an onus on those developing cloud solutions to obviously develop those securely, I think those who use cloud have to think about how they're using it and when they're using it, and that's really important. With IoT, I mean, everybody's talking about that these days and how to address that. I think one of the key challenges there is just the proliferation, right, and trying to keep up. I mean, who would have thought, I think it was last year, there was the story in Las Vegas about the casino that got hit because the aquarium had the temperature control and it was connected to the internet.
Yeah.
And who would have thought at one time I need to worry about a fish tank because a cyber threat's going to come through there possibly. So I think just that awareness of how connected we've become in places that people never expected to be, and trying to understand that's a really big challenge in that area at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you're fishing through fish.
Exactly.
I actually heard about that fish tank story yesterday, so it's kind of funny that you brought it back up.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't have known until then. Thank you for that. So let's just try to, I guess, move a little more broadly across the field. Are cybersecurity professionals difficult to recruit and retain given the current workforce shortage?
Yeah, I think, look, everybody in my position knows there's not enough cyber skills around. And I think the latest metrics, some of which I think you guys have, it's like 3.5 million by 2021.
Yeah, it's the research we came up with and found.
Yeah, so, and that's not shocking to anybody in this role. It's a very, very challenging trying to recruit and find that source. So I think a lot of us have taken the approach of you can't find enough resource, so you want to build and train.
Okay.
So that also, though, has changed over time because you're not looking for any particular skill set. There used to be almost a de facto so many years of this, experience or that experience, whereas people are looking far more broadly now. So to bring in people from different disciplines, not just technology or computer science or engineering, also looking at skills around data analysis and pattern recognition, so people from marketing and lots of different areas. Legal expertise relative to cyber. So there's so many different facets. So I think broadening the pool that you search from, but additionally having a real commitment to training, which is something that we do. So whether it's internship programs or things like return to work programs, and whether that is folks who've taken a sabbatical and want to return into the market and reskilling and retraining people. Lots of different options there. And I think everybody has started to broaden out that focus. We certainly have, and it's been very helpful and successful for us. When it comes to retention, I think you don't just apply that logic to the folks you're trying to recruit. You have to constantly be building that skill set of the folks you have internally. So we talked about how technology evolves. So there's that consistent training, but additionally there's so many areas now that are relevant to cyber, be it compliance or risk or legal or deep forensics or whatever it may be. So there's lots of different options, and then allowing your team to have that opportunity to have a career that can span multiple different disciplines, but all within that cyber vertical. I think when they see the commitment to supporting them through that, that's a great way to retain people, and certainly is something we've focused on and been very helpful for us.
So it's been working for you?
Yes, it has. I mean, it's a constant challenge and it's a constant effort.
Okay.
But look, technology is great and incredibly important, but you have to have the right people.
Yeah.
So investing the time and the resource in those people is really important to us, and it's made a real difference for us in being able to retain folks and being able to find new and great talent.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Investing in people at the beginning sort of saves, money at the end after a threat happens.
Yeah, absolutely it does. But I think that it's also that constant investment, though. They are your single greatest resource, your people, because they'll figure out new ways to do things. They'll leverage the technology. They are the drivers of the innovation. So having the right people is just critically important.
So since you've been in the industry for a little while, and we're talking about sort of the evolution of technology, have you seen a change in the diversity of the workforce in terms of women, minorities, and neurological differences?
Yeah, I think definitely on the overall diversity in the workforce. So like we were saying earlier, we've been focused on broadening our candidate pool and having a far more diverse pool because we're better because of that. If you have more diversity of thought and perspective, you're going to be better. You're going to be more innovative.
That's like, bringing people in with the non-technical skills as well.
Exactly. It's just a different way of looking at something. And that can just generate great conversation, great ideas. So I think it's really necessary to do. I think relative to sort of gender diversity, absolutely, there's been a big shift. So when I started, I would be the only woman in the room, or maybe there might be one other. That's definitely changed over time. I think statistics have been changing as well.
Yeah.
So we saw originally years ago where it was like 11% of women in cyber, and it's now 20% or thereabouts. I think we've seen that shift, and definitely even within my organization, 50% of my direct staff are female.
That's so good to hear.
And 36% of my overall team is female. And while we are proud of that, we're also not complacent because there's still more work to do in that area. But I think as much as you broaden the pool, I think also ensuring that you are diversifying the leadership, right? So again, at the leadership level where you're defining the processes, making those decisions, you again need that diversity of thought, so you have to do it in multiple ways. So we try to stay focused on doing that.
Yeah, I've got two follow-ups to that. One, we just published a little report where we recalculated the number of cybersecurity ventures. Now says we see 20% of women in the cybersecurity field. I always feel bad, or I respect and admire women like you, because you hear I was the only woman in the room, when I first began. And just to think in 2019 that we're finally moving forward, but still not enough. I mean, can you say anything to that? Like what that experience was like or anything?
I think, at the time, maybe I didn't realize, right, you accepted it for what it was. But, I'm a mother now with a daughter and a son.
Yeah.
I want everybody to have equal opportunities. Yeah. Also, as I've seen a lot of the really great talent we have coming in as interns, I will say I think I had an expectation that things had changed more, and they've helped educate me that we still have work to do, right? And not accepting that. And that's why I also think it's very important to have role models in the leadership for people to see what the opportunities are and think, hey, I could do that job. So even when I was like talking to some of my daughter's friends, in their school, it was probably the first time they ever thought I was cool when they understood what I did. But it also was, oh, wow, they didn't know about that type of career, right? Or they could do it. And it just shows people that it is an opportunity, right? It's something to do, and if you have interest in that area. So it's definitely changing. Like I said, we can't be complacent about it. But in the end, no matter what, it still is about the best talent to do the job. But you have to be very diverse, and it's not just a gender. You have to talk about underrepresented minorities.
Yeah.
And honestly, we are selling ourselves short if we don't focus on being inclusive and being diverse.
Okay.
Because to that point, we won't be as innovative. We won't have as many great ideas. So it's really something that I think is just critical to what we do.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, representation is so important because that's how you build the pipeline.
Absolutely.
To get more people in. Okay, so then we're also doing some reporting and thinking about cybersecurity in education. What do you think is being done, or can anything change at the high school levels, considering you were just talking about your children, for both girls and boys?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more security education and awareness we can do. So within our company in HPE, there's a real commitment to community service and pro bono work. And out of that, we actually have done an initiative that we're very proud of, where we did a collaboration with the Girl Scouts Nation's Capital and developed out a cybersecurity curriculum in order to help educate kids how to kind of be on the internet safely. But we also really believe in learning about technology through technology. And so we developed an online game that basically takes all the facets of the curriculum but the kids can learn about it in a game format. So we collaborated with the games company in order to do that. And that's been hugely successful, really well accepted. Girl Scouts Nation's Capital, we're a fabulous partner. They support 60,000 Girl Scouts.
Oh, wow.
And have, I think, another about 27,000 adults, obviously, as volunteers who support. So it's a really big audience that we can reach. And just the reaction, both within that council, who were wonderful partners to work with on that, but additionally from other councils and other organizations. And it's really hit home how we need to do far more. And so we're looking to continue expanding that. Now, we have other programs like Code Wars that we do, where as a company we reach out to high schools and introduce kids to STEM, et cetera. But it shows within the cyber area in particular, there's a definite need and a real appetite to help educate kids. Now, we specifically focused on the 9 to 11 age group because most kids, get their first device when they're age 10.
Yeah.
Most kids get their first social media account when they're 11. So that's for us, it was a really important age group to get the initial message out to, but we're expanding that far more broadly for K through 12. And so we're super proud of it. It's been great personal satisfaction because, as I said, I have a child myself who is a Girl Scout.
Okay.
So to see that, but see how it impacts so many people and just how many people have wanted to help and contribute. But there's a definite need. We need to do as much education as possible. It comes down to, as a parent, you would never send your kid outside the front door if you didn't teach them how to cross the road or how to buckle their safety belts.
Yes.
And you really need to teach them some basics of how to protect themselves on the internet. It really is a life skill these days for most kids. They need to learn how to be safe. It's
so interesting. You said it's a life skill. How has it been received with it?
Really well. So, Girl Scouts Council has been wonderful at talking to other councils about it. Lots of inquiries from lots of different organizations globally.
Okay.
Who just love the idea and love the approach. And look, there's cyber education out there, but what we did was a little bit different with the online game and working with a professional games company in order to develop something that we really thought would hit home and engage the kids. Because as much as it is cyber awareness, part of it too is just, sparking that interest and curiosity, because that will, help kids to learn more, not only about cyber and how to protect themselves, but also in STEM, right? So there's sort of multiple benefits to doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's been really well received. So we've had lots of inquiries and we're talking to lots of different organizations about what additionally we can do.
That's nice. Any final thoughts you'd like to add about cybersecurity, being a CISO, anything in general?
Look, I think I've heard some other people say, look, I feel very privileged to be in the job I'm in. I think it's, important. We all take it sort of as a personal mission in helping to protect and defend, not just our businesses, but our friends and our families. So continuing the education is really important, and that cooperation between each of us, which is so important, continuing to sort of fight the good fight.
Yeah, that's good. So thank you for coming down today. This was another Ask the CISO interview with Liz Joyce, sponsored by Fortinet. We really appreciate you being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks very much.
Thanks.